Hey, it's Friday afternoon. John Pollock and Wai Ting here with a post-wrestling news update. Hello, Wai.
Hey, John. How you doing?
I was thinking today, you know what? I have not talked to you enough this week. I need some more Wai Ting, and I'm not waiting until 10:30 p.m. Eastern tonight when we are live with Rewind to SmackDown for all our patrons. So here we are to chat today's news.
Well, that's a very nice gesture. I always welcome a call, even on a Friday afternoon. Yeah, let's see. Let's continue this and see how it goes.
We're going to talk mainly about the Wednesday night ratings, which, of course, always a lot of keen interest towards, but especially so given the recent momentum for AEW Dynamite. And I guess this week was definitely a cooling down period for that momentum. It was kind of interesting to see. I think everyone expected they would be down. How significantly would they be? And really, they were down to their levels that they had been averaging in October or November, right at that pace. They did 806,000 viewers and a .32 in the demo. Where they really got hit was among its younger audience. Men 12 to 34 were down 56% this week. Women in the same age category down 45.5%. Adults 18 to 34 were down 48%. So I would say, wait, as I mentioned, I think everyone expected them to be down, but I thought this was more than I anticipated. And it was, that is one thing of when you hit a big high, it's sometimes the drop is significant, but this was, I think it was clearly not a case of the momentum built that you could just ride that wave and it was naturally going to continue or at least level off a little bit below what was done the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that, the main thing coming out of this is how much of the audience that they managed to gain over the past 2 episodes were they able to retain. And, seeing this week, for whatever reason, not that much interest, or not as much interest from maybe a lot of those people just dipping in. I mean, it is a number that's better than their average over the past 2 months, but
still third for the night. I guess we're just looking at what they grew over the last 2 weeks, and for whatever reason, what didn't bring those people back this week, and are they going to be sampling in the coming weeks? Especially, I think December 30th is the next notable night where they're promoting that big Omega Phoenix match.
Sure, yeah. I mean, really, this particular edition of Dynamite, I don't know how much of a hook it really had compared to previous 2 episodes, and I think the rating kind of reflects that. So, is that going to change the way that they produce these shows in the future? I think they try to make all of them as perhaps enticing as possible. Inevitably, you're going to kind of have some just, flatter shows. But tonight, or this week, really kind of reflected the result of coming off of a really hype show, a really well-performing show, and then maybe a not-so-hype show. It does make a difference.
I think this is also a dangerous game you can get into where, listen, we're as guilty as anybody that puts a lot of attention on the week-to-week numbers, and it's a good indicator of kind of what connects in the moment. But as the company, like this week's show, part of the objective was like, you can't do a Sting every week. You can't do an Omega Moxley every week. We realized that, you can go to that well several times, and AEW has shown an ability to attract people when they have those big things. On Wednesday, one of the prime focuses was setting up these matches with, you're looking at Top Flight, and you're looking at, some unproven acts to get them into positions where the long-term game, you do need to create new stars. And I think that's a lot of next week's show as well, given that the fact that we've got Top Flight against Jericho and MJF, and then we've got the Acclaimed going for the tag titles. So I think that's the balance, is that you can't just give away your biggest things or rely on your already established stars as well. And that becomes the balancing act. You want to perform very well. And I think that this is a good average number for AEW. I guess you would just be disappointed if all these new people tuned in last week, that if you had created these new fans that were going to tune in and they're sticking with the program regardless of a hook like a Sting or a major title match.
Well, on the other side, NXT gained a whole lot from last week, and it makes you wonder, could it be maybe a list of more high profile matches that they were showcasing on that show as opposed to maybe Dynamite? Like, is this simply a case of people flipping over to the other channel, or were people just not as many people watching wrestling altogether?
It sounded like, and in looking at the Observer's breakdown of the quarters, that wasn't necessarily the case, that there was a gigantic amount of people that tuned in at the beginning of Dynamite. Like, the opening 6-man tag had over 1 million viewers, and then it went down after that. But NXT, I took that as a pretty good number and a good sign for NXT. Number one, they were up 16% in viewership, up 12% in their demo, and the big thing on the show that seemed to perform best was right in the middle of the show, the Kyle O'Reilly, Pete Dunne match. And I think that's a good sign for several reasons. Number one, they were able to put out a strong wrestling match. And I think the fact that they advertised it as uninterrupted, it told people you're getting a lengthy match. It's not going to be some, 5-minute shenanigans. I think people believe that we're going to get a strong, maybe a takeover style wrestling match. And you have the roster that every now and then you can do a match like that has implications towards the title picture. I think that's a good sign for NXT as well, that they were able to do that. And I mean, in the final quarter, this again coming from the Observer, is the Toni Storm match with Rhea Ripley actually had more total viewers than the Omega Janela match, although in the demo figure it was significantly more for Omega and Janela. But yeah, for NXT, I thought I took this as a good number for them, and ideas for the future as well, that they can put out a 20-minute match and people will tune into that.
I did too. It seemed like a good rebound from previous weeks, and shows that it's, at least in terms of the overall rating, still can be very close. My whole thinking when you see the results of these is that clearly good wrestling is a draw, on either show.
Now it is, yes.
So why isn't Raw taking the same lessons? Why isn't SmackDown taking the same lessons? Why do we continue to see so many matches just end without any sort of significant result? Or insignificant matches being put on TV?
I think that you have, number one, I don't see, I do feel like there is a certain difference that we're getting when it comes to, getting that match on Raw. That if that Kyle O'Reilly, Pete Dunne match happens on Raw, you definitely, I think, have the commercial breaks in there, number one. And second, I think that you're not necessarily presenting that same style. Like, that's been one of the criticisms of the, what is connecting with younger fans are, a definite difference that you see certainly in AEW. And I would extend that to NXT as well versus the main roster. But you are right in that if you're following this, the argument is that your wrestling audience, that you are down to your fans that are still going out of your way to watch this, that is attractive to them. Getting a big match. It's also a unique match too. Like, Dunne and O'Reilly was the combination everyone wanted to see coming out of War Games. That opening 5-minute period, that's immediately what we thought was, I want to see a longer version of this. On Raw, I think you do have to work to get to those combinations that are also fresh, that so many pairings have been exhausted, that you want to present it in such a way that it's like Drew McIntyre and Randy Orton worked, but that to me is like the ultimate stakes you could put on a Raw.
They have the people, they have the pairings. Whether or not they can make them feel special is a different story. They're plenty special once they enter the show, and that specialness just tends to dwindle. But clearly, there's a great big craving for good wrestling, good well hyped wrestling featuring talented performers. And I guess I can't really see why we don't get that across the board.
Next Wednesday will be, it's kind of a number that I don't know how much you can put into. I think it'll bear itself out in the future weeks. But again, it's AEW is going to get one of their biggest lead-ins of the year with the NBA game. And depending on whatever they put in that opening quarter, that's probably going to be, if not your most watched quarter, will be, one of. And I would venture to guess it's probably going to be the biggest. Does that audience have a curiosity that keeps them later in the show. And again, it's another opportunity for, eyeballs to see your product for whether it be the first time or audiences that are not following week to week. So that is, I think, an important way to start the show next week. But ultimately, it comes down to, are people satisfied with the show? And that's kind of the experiment of the past couple of weeks with AEW, is reaching newer people and hoping that they find this show to be entertaining, that they become habitual viewers of it.
We'll see what they start the show off with. I mean, it's not the first time that they followed NBA. And my guess is that it's not going to be a major difference maker. It is everything. Every single one of these lead-in situations is a big opportunity for them. But I don't really expect numbers to immediately reflect that. What do you think for next week?
I think you put your best foot forward with that first match. I really like the idea of the Bucks and the Acclaimed in that segment, and then it's a crapshoot of afterwards. Like, it may be inevitable that you're going to just see a big drop in the second quarter. Like, there's going to be fans that listen. They were tuning in for the basketball game. Maybe something catches their eye and you hold their attention for a couple of minutes, but they're not there to watch wrestling on that night. But again, if you do something, those are the opportunities I think you always try and maximize to grow your audience when you're, get the attention of non-wrestling fans that may be inspired to watch your product if you present something that is compelling enough. But it's obviously a tricky task. And I think we saw it this week, that just the novelty of, hey, Sting's appearing. It was a very minor appearance this week, and it wasn't enough that it was going to be able to ride the momentum of the two prior weeks. That, and the other side is, you can't be necessarily putting out gigantic events every single week. Like, that's, you just can't manage that over time. And that's a trap you can get into. So we will see how AEW follows after this number, after two really strong weeks. Interesting, though, Wade, was in Canada, they actually did more viewers on Wednesday night than they did for the Winter is Coming special. They did not have significant sports competition, and therefore they were the top sports program in the country. But they did 120,000 viewers, which was about 12,000 more than the Moxley Omega show.
Yeah, I can't really explain. I mean, it seems like Canada thought this
loves 12-man tags.
I mean, it's either that or just maybe a general kind of like feeling towards AEW being a more important show lately that's somehow retained in Canada, while it didn't necessarily this week in the US. So,
just a few other stories before we get out of here. On Thursday, Dr. Alfonso Morales, who was an institution within Lucha Libre, passed away. He was 71 years of age, sort of a guy that held many important roles within the industry in Mexico. He was a legitimate doctor who got his doctorate in psychology and then got involved as a reporter. He was one of the founders of Super Luchas and later became the editor-in-chief at Boxy Lucha, which was a role he had for 10 years. But most prominently, he was a commentator for both boxing and for Lucha. And at the peak, he worked for Televisa, which was the major network that carried CMLL. And later, when Antonio Pena launched AAA, they added AAA as well. So at the time these two companies are warring together, it's Alfonso Morales who is calling both shows. So this would have been the equivalent if in 1998, a network got both Raw and Nitro, put them on different nights, and Jim Ross was calling Raw and Nitro at the peak. So that was, the power of the network and Morales' role in all of this. There's a great bio in the Observer newsletter that's out this week, and just a really important figure in the history of Lucha Libre in a non-wrestling role. And SmackDown tonight, we've got the Street Profits against the Dirty Dogs for the SmackDown tag titles. Bianca Belair against Bayley. Carmella, get ready for this way, will hold a champagne toast prior to TLC. And Sami Zayn hosts the Sammy Awards.
Love it. The Sammy Awards. Forget the Slammies. It's the Sammys.
Yes. not the corrupt Slammy Awards, as he pointed out. So we are going to be back tonight, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, for all members of the Post Wrestling Cafe. We will be going through all of SmackDown. We will preview TLC, and we'll be joined by John Ceno, who will be covering the ROH Final Battle card, which is tonight. The pre-show's at 8. The pay-per-view is at 9. So a stacked edition of Rewind to SmackDown for all our Cafe members, Mr. Ting.
Yeah, 10:30 start time. Patrons should have the Zoom link right now. If you're not a patron, consider signing up. PostWrestlingCafe.com.
$6 a month, postwrestlingcafe.com. We'll speak with you tonight at 10:30 p.m.